Hmm. Hmm. There. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Israel Dialogues. I'm so pleased to be with you all again. It's been too long since I had the chance to attend, although I've been catching up online, and especially I found last week's session to be particularly engaging and well done. Not that they aren't all exceptionally well done, but that one was truly superb. So thank you so much to John and Shai for their insight into the ICC drama that we spoke about last week. Um, I'm going to hand things over to David in just a moment. I'm still waiting for a few people to arrive. There we go. I'm still waiting for a few people to arrive, but we will get started very shortly. And I just want to thank everyone for their attendance, to say an early Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to learning with you all today. David.
Thank you. Just we're waiting for Mayor Litvak to join us. I think he's just about to. Indeed, perfect timing. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you. I know you're not in Israel, you're in Washington, and it's a pleasure again to have you join us in Israel Dialogues. I know that you've been a speaker for us a number of times over the past few years. Iran and things related to Iran in the region and internationally remain as important as they have in the past. So your wisdom, your insight, your knowledge is much appreciated and required. For our viewers, those of you who've not had the opportunity to hear from Mayor before, just a brief introduction. Uh, Professor Litvak is a professor in the Department of Middle Eastern History at Tel Aviv University, and he's also, once again, the director of the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies. And Meir's focus is primarily on modern Iranian history, Shia history, modern Islamic movements, and Arab anti-Semitism, all of which are relevant both in the past and unfortunately still today. Meir's focus today, not surprisingly, is going to be on Iran in terms of its relationship with Israel, Israeli-Iranian, Iranian-Israeli, but that obviously is located in the larger Middle East region. It has repercussions and is also affected by the larger global security environment. We can observe it now in terms of what's happening in Syria, where both Iran and Russia have been long-standing patrons of Assad, and how that is playing out and perhaps has been affected by Iranian relations with Hezbollah and what Israel and Hezbollah have been through over the last year. So all this ties together in interesting, complex ways. And we welcome, Mary, your time. Thank you for your time and turn the screen over to you.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I should ask you, you needed a shared screen. Hopefully that's
Yes.
set up for you.
Okay, now disable.
Les or Sam, Rabbi K, we need the shared screen.
I'm working on it.
Thank you.
That should work now.
Okay, let me see. Yes. Okay, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be here once again. Let me say that I initially prepared this lecture talk about whether or not Israel and Iran are heading toward a clash, but since David mentioned the need to speak about Iran background, let me say that I don't think it's new to anyone that Iran is the only country in the world that calls for the elimination of Israel. The slogan Israel must be wiped off the map of the earth is appears in every public places and chanted every Friday, and also in every speech that Supreme Leader Khamenei gives. By the way, he gives 2-3 speeches a week, so they hear this slogan a lot. But I won't go into the history of the ideological background of this, but let me just say that if you look at Iran's strategy in recent years, there's an interesting question whether or not Iran's strategy has been defensive or aggressive. And let me explain. Iran, the way Iran perceives itself, it is a country under siege. The Iranian regime is a paranoid regime. The Iranian regime believes that it is under siege by the West, mainly the US, but also Israel, and the West and Israel seek to destroy the Islamic regime because the Islamic regime is the flag bearer of the struggle for international justice for the oppressed in the world against Western exploitation, hegemony, domination, etc. So they see themselves as under attack, under siege. But interestingly enough, the solution to this siege mentality, you can say, is proactive. Let's fight the enemy in its own territory. In some ways, I think there's interesting similarities, I think, between Iran and what I would say, if I look at Germany in 1914, when Germany believed that it was, again, surrounded or by the Russians and the French. The German solution was, let's launch a war and break this siege. Okay, Germans saw it as a defensive war, of course, even though they were the aggressors. I think there are many similarities to Iran. Now, the means that Iran is employing since the early 1980s is the use of proxies. That is, Shia militias that they have established in various Arab countries that would serve as the first line of defense for Iran from its enemies, and also would help expand Iranian influence in those countries. And among those proxies, I would say the most important one is Hezbollah in Lebanon. I would also call it the darling of the Iranian regime. Hezbollah had been the most loyal, effective proxy of Iran since the 1980s. We also have various Shia militias in Iraq. 6 of them, which are subordinate to the Iranian regime. They are loyal, but a little bit unruly. Another proxy are the Houthis in Yemen. Not exactly Shias in the same branch of Iran. Yemen, they are Zaydis. Iran, they are called Twelvers Shia. They are the rulers of the country. Interestingly enough, about the Houthis, and you can see the slogan here. I'll try. It's small, but you have to trust my translation. It says 5 things. Allahu Akbar. God is greatest. Death to America. Death to Israel. A curse upon the Jews, and victory for Islam. It is interesting that Yemen, which is 1,500 kilometers or 2,000 kilometers away from Israel, okay, in which there are today less than 100 Jews left in Yemen, the issue of the elimination of Israel and a curse upon the Jews is 2 of the 5 leading slogans of the Houthi regime in Yemen. In addition, there are Afghan and Pakistani brigades of Shi'is who fight for Iran. The Afghans are mostly Afghan refugees who come to Iran, and they are mobilized with the promise that they would receive Iranian citizenship and benefits. And many of them join. They do receive this benefit. So this is the Iranian strategy. Use the proxies, let them spill their blood for the sake of Iran. I always like to quote, I think I mentioned it here in this new form in the past, a Saudi journalist who said once that the Iranians are willing to fight until the last drop of blood of the last Arab. Since 2005, Iran was able to form what they call the axis of resistance, that is a strategic political bloc composed of Iraq, Syria under Assad, and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hamas and Islamic Jihad were not full-fledged members of this axis, although we can say affiliated with it a little bit, because they're not Shia. Now, another very important element of Iran's strategy in the past 20 years or more has been the use of reliance on ballistic missiles. Now, the reason Iran opted for ballistic missiles as its main weapon or main strategic weapon is because the Iranian conventional army is very weak because of the sanctions and other problems. It is using old equipment from the 1970s. If you remember the helicopter crash of former President Raisi, one reason why the crash took place because he used the helicopter that was going back to the 70s. Iran doesn't have a good air force. And again, ballistic missiles were supposed to substitute for conventional army. Iran built I would say, very impressive arsenal of more than 2,000 ballistic missiles for all ranges, from 300 kilometers to 10,000 kilometers. It can threaten Europe, not yet the US, in a way as a mean of political extortion. These rockets were based on North Korean technology, which the Iranians improved significantly. If you look at the strategy again, in the recent years, we could see growing sense of confidence among the Iranians. And here I always like to cite General Salami, the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guards, who boasted a few years ago that if in the past we defended Iran from our Iraqi border, nowadays our defensive line or strategic border is the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa. That is, we are not offensive, we are not aggressive, we're only opting for defense, but we defend Iran from North Africa. Okay? This is what I mean, defensive aggressive. Now, Iran has been waging a war of attrition against Israel for many years. As part of a strategy to bring Israel to its knees and agree to voluntarily dismantle itself as a state. And Israel has been facing a dilemma vis-a-vis Iran since before October 7th about how to address this war of attrition. There was a sense in Israel that this war of attrition exacts a price from Israel, casualties and destruction, limited, and also cost of money, while Iran remains immune. And then Israel, some, not scholars, I would say, but the military strategists, analysts, equated Israel with the situation of a man facing a tiger. What should we do vis-a-vis this tiger? Should Israel aim at what some of them said, tiger's head? It is, let's attack Iran itself in order to force it to stop the war of attrition. In a way, you could say it would be more effective if Iran would pay a price for its war of attrition, because before that, Iran did not pay any price for it. It could be more effective. The problem is it is much more difficult. There are 1,500 kilometers separating us from Iran. And it is also risky. It could lead to a full-scale war with Iran, which Israel did not want. Or should Israel focus on the proxies? That is, Israel should continue limited attacks on Hezbollah, by the way, trying to stop or intercept weapons deliveries from Iran to Hezbollah, because such attacks would cause more damage to Hezbollah. We have advantages, tactical and operational advantages in waging such warfare, again, because it's closer to our border, we have better intelligence, etc. But as someone said, you are striking the tiger's nails, but you're not deterring the tiger. Because once we attack the proxies, Iran has no incentive to stop or de-escalate the struggle. This was the Israeli dilemma, I would say, until October 7th. Now, if we look at Iran and October 7th, I would say there's, I think, the consensus now in Israel on several issues. One is that Iran played a key role in the preparation for October 7th. And these preparations, by the way, go back to at least 2 years. That is, as much as I dislike the Netanyahu, the recent Israeli government, it's not because of Smotrich or Ben-Gvir. It goes much earlier. Already in April 2023, that is 6 months before the October attack, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad formed a joint headquarters in Beirut under UN auspices to coordinate a multi-front war against Israel. We could also see indications in the media, in statements of leaders, that the old perception that Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah leader coined in the early 21st century, that Israeli society is a weak society. What do you call it? Weak as a spider web. That Israeli society is disintegrating. And this sense that Israeli society is disintegrating was received a boost because of the internal crisis that took place in Israel before the war, following the current government's attempt to completely overhaul the judicial and I would say the political system in Israel. And the belief was that Israeli society is disintegrating, that in fact, the idea of eliminating Israel has become feasible. It is no longer a long-distance dream that may happen several decades from now, but it is feasible and it can be expedited by action right now. Now, if so, why didn't Yahya Sinwar, Hamas leader, inform Iran and Islam and Hezbollah about his plans to attack? Apparently because he was afraid of foreign intelligence leakage, that Israel will get information about it. Now, he didn't know how that we had the information, but our analysis was horrible. It was disastrous, but we had the information. The fact that he did not inform Iran and Hezbollah helped them as an excuse why they did not get involved on October 7th, although Hezbollah began to attack Israel on October 8th. Now, if I come to Israeli, this is the event side. I won't go into the description of the Hezbollah warfare against Israel, and probably too well. What I would say is if you look at Israeli actions that now led to the direct confrontation with Iran, we can basically speak of 2 actions right now. One is the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas. Let me say here, Haniyeh was a vicious anti-Semite. Haniyeh was a radical. Haniyeh called for the extermination of Israel many times. But personally, I don't think that his assassination was useful. Haniyeh was a political figure, and he was not a real leader of Hamas. The leader of Hamas was Yahya Sinwar. He did not have much control over Gaza. His assassination was more symbolic. That is, it did not affect Hamas capabilities in any way, but his assassination in Tehran as an official guest of the Iranian government was perceived as an intolerable provocation by Israel against Iran, and this is something that Iran could not swallow. Again, I say I think it was not a smart Israeli move. And of course, the interesting thing is that when Israel killed Hassan Nasrallah, then Iran felt the need to retaliate. and Iran waged the massive rocket attack against Israel. But the problem is, from Iran point of view, is that its strategy against Israel proved to be deficient. When Iran waged its first attack on Israel, they were using rockets and drones. It turned out that the drones gave Israel a very early, you can say, warning, and enabled Israel to organize itself before the attack. Worse, from the Iran point of view, the damage inflicted on Israel by the second attack, which was purely rockets, more than 300, close to 300 rockets, was significantly less than Iran expected. Meaning that the rockets are less effective as a strategic weapon than the Iranians had anticipated. The Israeli retaliatory attacks on Iran, on the other hand, proved to be much more destructive than the Iranians had imagined. Israel destroyed an important facility which produced fuel for missiles, causing a very serious delay in the production of missiles. Now, Iran had, let's say, something like 2,000 missiles. It launched against Israel close to 500 missiles, meaning that a quarter of its arsenal was wasted. And now, because of the Israeli attack, it will be much more difficult for Iran to rebuild its arsenal. So they find themselves here now in a problem. This is one problem. Another equally disturbing problem from their point of view was that Israel was able to destroy large part of the Iran air defense system, which really shows that Iran was totally exposed. And Russia now is unable to replenish these air defenses because Russia has its own problems. Now, another problem that the Israeli attacks showed was that the aerial attacks and other attacks, that Iran is thoroughly penetrated by the Israeli intelligence. The fact that the Israelis knew in which apartment Ismail Haniyeh was staying, okay, and or that attack the exact facilities shows the Iranians that the Israelis have unbelievable access to all the deepest secrets, and that created, first of all, it undermines a sense of security. What else do the Israelis know? It also creates an atmosphere of suspicion and distrust. Who are the traitors? Who are the people who have enabled Israel to penetrate the UN system so much? And there's internal infight here between the Revolutionary Guards and the Ministry of Intelligence, each blaming the other for the security breaches that enabled Israel to attack, and also led to, I would say, growing distrust of these organizations by Supreme Leader Khamenei. These serve as, again, deterrent against further Iran retaliation. Now, another blow that Iran suffered was the blow to Hezbollah that Israel inflicted. Again, Hezbollah was the most reliable proxy that Iran had for many years. Not only most reliable, most effective. Iran used Hezbollah in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria. Hassan Nasrallah's relations with Khamenei were very close. True, Nasrallah saw himself as totally subordinate to Khamenei, but there was deep, you could say, personal appreciation between these two men. And Nasrallah had, I would say, charismatic aura. Nasrallah had an aura of invincibility. His death clearly dealt a major blow. Now, the blow to Hezbollah, the fact that Israel was able to destroy fairly quickly 90% of Hezbollah's heavy rockets, or maybe less than 90%, but still the majority of Hezbollah heavy rockets, also served as posed a problem for Iran, because Hezbollah was supposed to serve as the deterrent from attacks against Iran. Of course, another problem is that once the Hezbollah not only led Lebanon to a destructive war against Israel, Lebanon paid and pays a very high price. And Hezbollah is less popular today in Lebanon than any time in the past. It is still a powerful organization. Lebanon is a broken society. It is a broken state. They are not going to remove Hezbollah, but it makes life more difficult for Hezbollah. And again, while Hezbollah, on the more negative side, while Hezbollah certainly suffered a major blow, it has not been destroyed, far from it. And my guess is Iran will devote great efforts and resources to rebuild Hezbollah, but it will require time. that led to a situation that now, right now, there is a very intense debate in Iran whether or not to retaliate against Israel. And here the two main advocates are, on the one hand, the newly elected President Pezeshkian, who is by no means a Zionist or no lover of the Jews by any means, but Pezeshkian understands that Iran suffers from severe socio-economic problems. Pezeshkian's ticket was to salvage the Iranian economy. I think this was the reason why Khamenei allowed him to be elected, because Khamenei is afraid that the economic situation may lead to internal unrest, and he, I would say, enabled Pezeshkian to win. Pezeshkian is also aware of the growing gap between the regime and the people. I'll show in a second something. And Pezeshkian understands that if the only way to heal Iranian deep economic problems is some kind of rapprochement with the West, the need to remove the sanctions. And that requires a certain price. And the price is not going to full-scale war against Israel. One way, by the way, that Pezeshkian has been pursuing, with, of course, Khamenei's permission, was to seek rapprochement with Iran's neighbors, mainly the Saudis. And the other side, by the way, the picture. If you can see here, when I speak about a growing gap between the regime and the society, is the women defying the hijab law. Now, all Islamic movements on the vote attribute tremendous importance to how women cover the dress and cover their head. And here we see in past year many Iranian women defying the hijab laws. By the way, paying a heavy, showing great defiance against the regime, but paying a heavy price. Some of these very brave young women were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Some were punished by lashes. There was even some cases of a brave woman who participated in an academic ceremony. She got a doctoral degree. She came to the ceremony without a hijab, and her doctoral degree was revoked. Now, this defiance against the regime is a problematic symptom. It shows again the gap. At the same time, I would say this is not something that threatens the regime's survival. As much as I admire these brave women and they deserve all the admiration, it's not going to destroy the Iranian regime. It's a nuisance, but it's not going to. It's not. But it certainly tells the regime that it cannot count on popular support should it wage an aggressive war against Israel. Now, on the other side of the spectrum stands the military, especially the Revolutionary Guards, which demand and pushes for retaliation against Israel. And here I would say there are several reasons why they do it. First of all, there are indications for several members of or generals or factions within the armed forces, especially the Revolutionary Guards. I think the fight against Israel has become their life mission. Some of them are truly committed to the ideal of destroying Israel. Many of them also feel the need to take revenge against past Israeli attacks. They believe that Israel was humiliated and must respond. Also, they understand that taking a hard position vis-a-vis Israel helps the Revolutionary Guards in the domestic power struggle. And they also benefit from it. It's not only ideology, but there's also benefit from it. And also, they argue that if Iran does not retaliate against Israel, it will be perceived as weak in the Middle East, and that will harm its regional position. Now, the two major things that I think now influence Iran policy to postpone for the time being and to go to war against Israel is one is Trump's election. Not only is it totally unpredictable, but there are voices within the new administration that are going to resume the policy of maximum pressure. And I would say apprehension from Trump, but also maybe believe that he's unpredictable, led some members of the Iranian elite to call for renewed negotiations with the US, this time from a position of strength because Iran has advanced much more in its nuclear capabilities. So its starting position in the negotiations is much stronger than before. At the same time, there's a possibility that any attempt by Pezeshkian to start negotiations with the US would be used as a weapon against him by the hardliners in Iran who are afraid of his domestic policies. And they may try to foil his negotiations with the US. The other issue, I would say great surprise, is the recent attack, rebel offensive in Syria, and the severe defeats that the Assad regime has suffered. Now, I am one of those who believe that Assad will not fall. I don't think that and I may be wrong, but I don't think the rebels are sufficiently organized or powerful eventually to conquer all of Syria. But the hasty withdrawals of the Syrian army from Aleppo and now from Hama, and maybe with the approaching rebels to Homs. Now, if they conquer Homs, they split Damascus from the Alawi areas in northern Syria here, which are the stronghold of the regime. If that happens, Assad regime will find itself in a very serious crisis. Now, Iran has a problem now. Hezbollah cannot extend the same kind of help it used before because it suffered major casualties. And Iran is trying to hastily organize the Afghan and Pakistani proxies to send troops to Syria. Russia is not able to help Assad the way it did before because Russian Air Force was moved again to the Ukraine. If in the past there were maybe 60 Russian airplanes in Syria, now there are less than 15, 10, 15. Russia is preoccupied. Russia cannot supply weapons. And for Iran, the loss of Syria would be a major strategic blow. It will make it extremely difficult to connect with Hezbollah in Lebanon. So in my view, Iran will devote great efforts and resources to help and salvage the Assad regime, which means that now Iran being preoccupied in Syria will certainly have much less time, I would say time, and I would say appetite now to go to war against Israel. So in my view, right now, the situation is that Iran, the likelihood that of a direct clash between Iran and Israel has been significantly lowered. And let me also add by one more point, which I didn't prepare in advance, but again, I think that Iran suffers from several structural long-term problems of economic inefficiency, major corruption. Ironically, I didn't prepare, but you have to believe me, Iran is one of the world's largest oil producers. Iran has the second largest reserves of natural gas. Ironically, today, Iran suffers from fuel shortages. Iran has to import fuel for cars and for electricity. Same thing with gas. And Iran needed to purchase gas from Turkmenistan, but it cannot pay Turkmenistan with cash. And therefore, Iran today suffers from chronic managed electricity outages. Every day, other sectors in various cities, various sectors in every city don't have electricity. That is, there's a saying in Hebrew, Yiddish, that the shoemaker goes barefoot. This is Iran today. And this is the proof, I would say, of the failure of the Iranian regime in the short run, but also poses, I would say, major threats to the regime in the long run. I will stop now and leave time for questions if you want.
You're on mute, David.
Sorry, my apologies. Thank you, Meir. That was terrific. A lot of insights. You covered a lot of material. So I'm sure that my colleagues, both on screen and viewers, will have questions. Let me start, however, from the, I guess, from the inside out, where you just left off. The resilience of the Iranian regime and the extent to which it has sufficient discretionary resources that it can continue to invest heavily in proxies, in defending them, in rebuilding them. My guess would be that if the Trump regime, the incoming Trump administration, does not impose further restrictions, if through diplomacy and negotiations, the Iranians are able to get out of the embargo and start both exporting and gaining the reserves necessary from its resources, that what you're suggesting is that the ideology of the regime is sufficiently embedded and direct that these resources will go towards rebuilding, replenishing, and further focusing on Israel as the quintessential enemy of the state, of the people. If that's the scenario, then wouldn't one expect, whether overtly or covertly, some combination of Israel, the Saudis, and the Americans to retain considerable pressure on Iran to continue to make its economic viability more and more fragile, more and more difficult, to the point that the gaps between the people and the regime grow. Now, I know I'm asking a speculative, hypothetical, but when I listen to you and what little I knew beforehand, it would seem to me that the Iranian regime is increasingly not just weakened, but caught in a dilemma, because if it wishes to have those sanctions removed, it wishes to try and expand and deepen its economy and to close the gap between itself and its people, then it has to change its foreign policy, behavior, has to adjust to new realities within the region. And I'm just wondering where you think this strategic thinking is going.
Okay, I agree with you, but with few reservations. First of all, so far it seems that the Trump administration will probably, again, will go for sanctions in the hope that they would force Iran to negotiate. Trump speaks about his will or wish to reach an agreement with Iran. He believes he's the ultimate negotiator, that he will make the perfect deal. But he will certainly resort to sanctions. Now, this is exactly the dilemma which you can see in Iran. I mean, the President Pezeshkian, okay, was elected precisely on the ticket that that Iran needs to remove sanctions. And of course, there's a price for it. The price is, again, Pezeshkian is not no lover of Zion, but he doesn't want Iran to fight. And he has other priorities. By the way, the same thing with former President Rouhani, who, again, was very much anti-Israeli, but did not thought Iran had other priorities and did not want to spend too much money on Hezbollah. Now, there's a difference between, let's say, trying to rebuild Hezbollah, which means investing, let's say, several $billion, but pushing toward new confrontation. At the same time, the Iranians now have enjoyed one advantage, is that Israel missed the Saudi option. The war in past, before the war, the Saudis were willing to move very significantly toward Israel, of some kind of recognition of Israel, if Israel would not necessarily even establish a Palestinian state, but simply say that it was willing to move toward a Palestinian state. Now, because of the war, because of the public opinion in Saudi Arabia, in the Arab world, etc., the Saudis declared clearly that now the precondition for any kind of not rapprochement, but normalization with Israel would require a high Israeli price, which so far this current Israeli government will never give. Is unable or unwilling to give. At the same time, we see now interesting, significant Saudi-Iranian rapprochement. Only last week there was joint meetings of foreign ministers, and even Mexico joined armed drills. Both the Saudis and the Iranians won this rapprochement because both of them realized, by the way, that confrontation harmed them both. Now, apparently, the Saudis are willing to forego a large-scale strategic pact with the US because they don't want to pay the price of the Israeli price. So this helps Iran. Now, Iran certainly hopes that it will be able to, somehow circumvent the sanctions, but unless there's a major change in US policy, the Iranian economy is not going to be salvaged. Now, by the way, there's many domestic, internal, structural problems of the Iranian economy that even if the sanctions are removed, are not going to be solved. From corruption to mismanagement to the priority of politics over economics and wrong resource allocation, etc. But it will certainly, yes, the regime will survive. By the way, I don't think the regime is in any danger of falling. There are too many things that help the regime to survive, so I don't think it's going to fall anytime soon, unfortunately.
John.
Thanks very much, Mayor and David. I was listening to a podcast the other day, Unholy Two Jews and the News, and they were interviewing Ehud Barak. And Barak at one point said that he kind of implied that he was less worried about Iran attaining full nuclear capability because in his view, Iran would never use it against Israel, knowing that they would be sent back to before the Middle Ages if they ever tried to, by both the United States and by Israel. So, I mean, do you share that view? So much energy, of course, and so much of what Bibi talks about is Iran nuclear, and obviously it remains a concern. But I'd just be interested in your views on what Barak says, and where do you think Iran is going on that front?
Okay, let me say first that I don't think that Iran, for the time being, and I think that as long as Khamenei is alive, that Iran will go for a bomb. And I think that the reason why Iran would not go for a bomb as long as Khamenei is alive is because it will lead to a nuclear race in the Middle East. That is, the Saudis said explicitly that the moment Iran will get a bomb, they will have a bomb. The Turks are making the preparations, and also the Egyptians. I don't think, and Iran does not want a nuclearized Middle East where you have 5 Middle Eastern states with nuclear weapons. They don't talk to each other very well. They are nervous. That's a very dangerous environment for Iran. I don't think Iran wants it. Secondly, Iran doesn't want nuclear. Iran understands that building nuclear weapons all the way will alienate China. And China is too important for them. For these reasons, I think that as long as Khamenei is alive, and because Khamenei is a very cautious person, they will not go to full bomb unless they feel that, again, they're totally threatened. One. Same time, let's say that I'm wrong, and they will get a bomb. Here, I think that Ehud Barak misses one point. A nuclear Iran does not need to use its nuclear weapons to become a major threat, because a nuclear Iran can become the neighborhood bully. It can use the nuclear umbrella as an extortion weapon against Israel, against every other state in the region. Don't you dare touch Hezbollah or else. Don't you dare touch the Iraqi militias or else. That is, the moment Iran gets nuclear weapons, Iran gets a major strategic advantage, which makes it a much more dangerous state, even without using nuclear weapons. Therefore, nuclear Iran is very bad. Even again, they don't use it. And I think, by the way, I don't think if they will have it, they will use it against Israel. Okay? Because a nuclear bomb for Iran is first and foremost intended to deter the US, not Israel. But again, even without using it, nuclear Iran is very, very bad. Now, the way to do it, by the way, to solve it, and here I think Netanyahu's major sin and mistake was through agreement. The JCPOA was a bad agreement. It had many, many loopholes, but as bad as it was better than no agreement at all. Because Netanyahu pushed Trump to withdraw from the agreement, we are today at a worse situation than we had been in 2015. That is, Netanyahu's strategy in this regard, as in many other things, by the way, has been a complete failure. Same thing with strategy vis-a-vis the Saudis and etc. I mean, it's been a complete failure.
So just a quick follow-up, if I may, David. So, we've seen Putin use that extortion weapon, and so I certainly understand where you're coming from. Just one other question about if Bibi and company, or if others in Israel decided they wanted to do something about it, about Iran about to become nuclear, or if they became nuclear, and I agree with you, that's not their priority right now. But it seems clear, just correct me, it seems clear Israel cannot do this by itself. It needs the US.
Yes.
And the US is not likely to want to engage if they have the same sort of understanding that you've just outlined.
But I agree. I don't think today Israel can stop Iran's advanced nuclear weapons. The belief that the Israeli Air Force can eliminate Iran's nuclear capabilities by attacks is an illusion. We can attack the nuclear facilities, we can cause major harm, but we cannot eliminate the nuclear capabilities because they have built them deep inside mountains. The need for what you call bunker busters bombs that we don't have and the Americans refuse to supply to us. And even if we attack them, there is no assurance that we will have destroyed everything. And even worse, let's say we even destroyed everything, we cannot destroy their know-how, and we cannot destroy their motivation. On the contrary, an Israeli attack will increase the motivation fivefold to build a nuclear bomb, and they will have a nuclear bomb. So I think that this is an illusion that an Israeli attack on Iran can stop Iran. The only thing that can stop Iran is some sort of an agreement, which is now not easy to achieve because, again, Iran is in a much more advanced position than it had been in 2015.
Thanks.
Right. Let me make one comment and ask one question, and then I want to invite Mark. The comment is that for those interested in this nuclear issue, there's a fascinating and tangled history that begins, at least partially, with A.Q. Khan out of Pakistan and the Soviets. This is back in the late 80s, where nuclear technology was both developed and moved around. And the North Koreans had secured Soviet missile technology and secured Pakistani nuclear technology. And they were already working away at that, the North Koreans, in the early 1990s, very early, late 1980s, early 1990s. The point being that the Americans knew all this, as did others. And while they threatened a number of times to go in, each time they made the decision it wouldn't work. They couldn't do it. And we now see where the North Koreans are. And the exchanges between the North Koreans and the Iranians became much more sophisticated and much deeper. And so I think your assessment is right, Mayor. I think there's a history to it.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think we know what the outcome is.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess I'd like to ask one question that goes even more deeply into the roots of this Iranian-Israel animosity conflict. We've seen the Saudis prior to October 7th being prepared to engage through back channels with the Americans and others about the possibility that if Israel and the Palestinians can, through negotiation, work out an arrangement that satisfies to some extent, knowing that they both have their costs, whether you call it a two-state solution or something else, but there is a Palestinian entity and an Israeli entity, and they're both secure. The Saudis are prepared to live with that. That does not undermine their reality in terms also of their religious doctrine, or they find ways to accept it. Is that a possibility in the way the last 25 years of Shiism has evolved through the dictates of Iran, that there is any possibility, even if there were this hypothetical negotiated resolution and the Palestinians had a sovereign entity and Israel still existed and Israel was there too? It's not the destruction of Israel, but it's something, call it two states, call it something else, side by side. Is it within the Iranian definition of the Shiism and their political ideology that emerges from it to stand down from this conflict?
Okay. Well, let me say that the Saudis, yes, indeed, have changed their position. You know, Saudi Arabia has undergone major changes, generation change. And also, by the way, 9/11 was a wake-up call for the Saudis. And I think that, you know, the present de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, understands correctly that radical Islam is very harmful to Saudi Arabia. And by the way, he fights radical Islam not only vis-a-vis Israel, domestically.
Yes.
He's pushing very harshly, and sometimes forcibly, the religious establishment to make very important, significant changes, which is very, very important. Now, this is the problem, however. In Saudi Arabia, it required generational change. It required also a traumatic event. I believe, unfortunately, that as long as Khamenei is alive, no change is possible. I think Khamenei is obsessed with Israel. Khamenei, I mean, for him, it's his life, like I would say almost, it's really an obsession. One thing, also, there is, again, an important faction in Iran, which now, again, I would say, committed ideologically, emotionally to fight Israel. At the same time, yes, first of all, Iran is undergoing major change. I think for most Iranians as a people, don't care about Israel. They may not like us, but they have much more urgent things to do. And there are members in the Iranian elite, like Rouhani, former president, who again is by no means a friend of Israel, but he has other priorities, and he's willing to, okay, we will all hope that Israel will be destroyed. We will never accept it, recognize it, but somehow we can, tolerate its existence. Yes, I think there are such people, but it will require, first of all, as long as Khamenei is alive, it's impossible. By the way, I'm afraid that his son, who may be his successor, is worse than him. But it will require time until it happens. And also Iran, again, the price that Iran will have to pay will increase and then make it possible. But religions change, religions will change all the time. All religions change in history.
Mm-hmm.
The Catholic Church advocated crusades and does not advocate crusades anymore. Again, it took several centuries or decades before the Catholic Church changed. And after 2,000 years, they forgave us for the crucifixion. So,
Mark?
Thank you, Meir, for, as David indicated, a very important analysis and bringing us up to date on the current situation with respect to Iran. I'd like to pull it back to sort of the domestic situation within Iran, if I may. I've been reading a lot about the human rights abuses in Iran. You alluded to it briefly in your comments in terms of imprisonments and some torture and that, but the number of executions that have been going on in Iran over the last many months has increased significantly from what I can tell.
Yes.
And the human rights abuses are just increasing in a very terrible way. And and you also made mention of how the Iranian people, the average Iranian citizen, isn't all that concerned about Israel. But what I want to try to understand is what, in addition to their own domestic challenges that they're facing, is there any indication that we have about how they're feeling about how the government is acting with respect to this whole proxy paradigm that they have and the things that they're doing in regard to their foreign policy? Like, do people really understand or know about it? And if they do, what's their thinking about it, given, of course, that they can't do much about it, given the political structure?
First of all, I fully agree with you that the human rights situation in Iran is worsening. The number of executions increases, which shows the regime is pressured. I think there are several indications that people again are not very happy. Now there's also a problem. When you say something from Iran, I don't know how fake but there was. I'll give you one interesting example. It was several months ago. There was a football match in Tehran, and the announcer told the people to stand up in the moment of silence for the Palestinians. And there were shouts in the stadium using very harsh, abusive words against the Palestinians. Meaning that, again, people indicating something. Say, okay, don't know how much representative it is, but now let me give you another example, by the way, of what UN people feel. Iran suffers from a very severe brain drain, which the Iranian government talks about as a strategic threat to the country. Specifically, by the way, among doctors, physicians and nurses. They speak about it as a national crisis, of how to stop it. Now, this brain drain is people vote with their feet. They want to get out. It's not easy. There's no problem getting out of Iran. It's not the Soviet Union. There's no, in the past, the regime encouraged everyone who's dissatisfied, the doors open, get out. But this is an indication for the regime. Now, there are always strikes, there are constant strikes in Iran now. Every week, every day, there are strikes of various government employees because of low salaries, arrears in paying salaries, etc. Again, is another indication that people are dissatisfied. The problem is that it is very difficult to transform these sporadic strikes into an organized mass movement because here repression is effective. But there are clear indications that there is dissatisfaction in Iran because of the situation, and there is clear misunderstanding. People don't understand why Iran spends billions of dollars on, in Yemen, in Iraq, and Lebanon when there's a problem. There's so many problems in Iran. And again, if you take the electricity outages, okay, of course it creates anger. But a country like Iran doesn't have enough fuel.
Thank you. David.
Let me just turn. There's a question from one of the viewers, from Alex Isman. He has an interesting paragraph about observing pro-Iranian Shia senior Iranian officials fleeing Syria, and leads to the question: if indeed Assad's regime collapses, how will that affect Iran's rearmament policy regarding Hezbollah? And how will that affect the presidential elections in Lebanon?
If the Assad regime falls, it will be a major strategic blow to Iran. Let me give you an example. During when the civil war in Syria in 2013, 2014 was ongoing, the Iran regime allocated major resources. The Iranian spokesman used to say that Syria is the 35th province of Iran. And some senior leaders said, if we lose Damascus, we'll not be able to defend Tehran. Okay? That was used in 2014, 2013 to justify Iranian involvement in Syria, it has not changed. If the Assad regime is gone, it will be very difficult for Iran to transfer weapons from Iraq to Syria, because then Israel can intercept it much more easily. And certainly it will affect the situation in Lebanon, although Hezbollah, again, you have to remember that the Shia are still the largest sect in Lebanon, and Hezbollah, despite the blows it suffered, is still a military force, and compared to other forces in Lebanon. And we also have to remember that the Lebanese system is totally broken and thoroughly corrupt. And so that I believe that if somehow a miracle can help the Lebanese, rebuild their country, will be very difficult. But certainly it will be a major blow to Iran. This is why I think that Iran will not allow the Assad regime to fall. They will eventually, do something to save him, because I don't think they can afford to allow his downfall.
So the next obvious question from that is where does Iraq fit? Because the Iraqis themselves are
They sent Iraqi militias. They sent Iraqi militias to Syria to help us.
So your sense is that Iraq domestically is strong enough, is stable enough that they can afford to send Iraqi militias to.
It's not Iraq, it sends. Iran sends the Iraqi militias to Syria.
Okay.
And the Russia card, I know you mentioned that they've only got X number of planes there and they're clearly occupied, but we can remember the barrel bombs. We can remember the chemical weapons that Assad himself used. They will undoubtedly pull out all the stops
Yes.
if the rebels approach Damascus or etc.
Yes, by the way, Israel bombed various Syrian facilities precisely in order to prevent them from falling down to the rebels. Because apparently one major production facility near Aleppo, Israel bombed it so that it would not fall into the rebels, because there may be chemical weapons there.
So can you talk a little bit about the complex situation that Israel finds itself in? I mean, even the Americans have said, of course, they don't want Al-Qaeda type rebels to take over, but on the other hand, anything that hurts Assad is a kind of a good thing. Where's Israel's strategic analysis of this?
Okay, I would say two things about Assad. One good thing about Assad is in the last year, he was very quiet and he did not participate in any action against Israel. And he even did not say too much, to the great disappointment and anger of the Iranians, of Hezbollah, of the Palestinians, and everyone else. Therefore, many Israelis say, no, Assad is now the lesser evil. Let him remain in power because, again, he's weak and he's cautious and he's not going to do anything harmful. At the same time, now, if we have Al-Qaeda state in Syria, it's going to be something like Hamas in Gaza, might be even worse. Although, by the way, I think that if they take over Syria, which I doubt it, they will be probably engaged in tremendous infighting among themselves, and they will be very busy before they can cause any problem to us. But I think the general tendency in Israel now is that Assad is the lesser evil, and that he is predictable, that we understand, and therefore a weak Assad is the preferable option.
Thank you.
Mark, let's see. I want to make sure I've covered questions in here. Meir, early on in your comments, you seem to imply that we are now further away than we've ever been before to the possibility of the Saudis, the Americans, and the Israelis coming to an agreement. That in the years since there has been new Saudi regime, and the Abraham Accords, and even before, there seem to be some opportunities, and now that's been torn asunder. It's simply not there. if we were to try and change that calculus and be more optimistic, are we basically saying it's not there until we have a change in government in Israel, a government that is less aggressive in terms of West Bank and Gaza, less aggressive in using terms like annexation, more open to returning to finding a way to have communications and serious discussions with Palestinians? Is that where the block is?
Yes, I think again, it's not necessarily a new government, but it's change of policy, change of now. Right now, Israel is seen as if it is preparing for a long-term stay in Gaza and maybe even consolidating or stay in Gaza. I read recently, yesterday, that Smotrich is talking publicly, openly about eliminating the Palestinian Authority. Well, this he failed, but eliminating the Israeli, what he called civilian control, basically in preparation for annexation. He believes that Trump will enable Israel to annex large parts of the West Bank. If, on the other hand, Israel would signal its readiness to, let's say, seriously, genuinely talk or prepare for the day after in Gaza, that is Hamas less, I mean, a new Gaza without Hamas government, then it could lead to a change. That is, maybe then the Saudis will again, maybe it won't be full normalization with Israel, but will certainly improve the situation with Gaza, with the Saudis, and so on. But as long as the Israeli government refuses to change its rhetoric and policy, and it's not only rhetoric, it's policy, it's not gonna, it doesn't look good. With the Saudis, and by the way, we also have problems with the Egyptians and the Jordanians, and we have, by the way, yeah, I think the way the Israeli government handles the Jordanians is preposterous. Jordan helped us repel 2 UN attacks, and we don't show them any gratitude. We don't do anything to help them, and the Jordan regime government is in deep trouble. And I think our policy toward the Jordanians is stupid, preposterous and stupid.
We had a good conversation with Asher Sesser on that.
Okay, so
that issue. First to John and then to Mark, please.
Yeah, so just quickly on the Saudis, I mean, the comment about Iran willing to fight Israel to the death of the last Arab, and then we've got what you said about Iran and Palestinians, and everybody seems to agree that the Sunni states really have very little regard for the Palestinians, have never really done anything. Abraham Accords ignored them completely. The pre-October 7 deal ignored them completely. Why the change now in Saudi? Is it the street, or is it the street? Are they really worried about their street?
Yes, I think that there is a genuine concern that what the people in the Arab countries have seen from Gaza and what they heard and what regardless if it's true or not, created an atmosphere that it is very, very difficult now for any Arab government to go openly. By the way, I think the only government that really tried to do a lot for the Palestinians were the Egyptians, up to a limit, and I think they are genuine in their desire to help the Palestinians. Again, not Hamas. The Egyptian government hates Hamas. But I think that Arab rulers now are under greater constraints than they've been before.
Thanks.
Mark?
Yes. Mir, the other day, I think there was a report that Palestinians and Hamas have been in discussions about the future governing of Gaza, working together with the Palestinian Authority having a role in governing Gaza if and when Israel leaves the area. If these reports are correct, what's the impact? What's the implications for Iran's ongoing support of Hamas? Does it extend that support to through to the Palestinians on the West Bank and to the Palestinian Authority, or are we overreaching on that?
I think the Palestinian Authority is desperately trying to regain legitimacy by, trying to offer something for Gaza and in agreement with Hamas. I think there's a difference between Abu Mazen, who is very much afraid of Hamas, and the other people who believe that it is essential for them to cooperate with Hamas. Now, I think that the idea of a joint Palestinian Authority Hamas government in Gaza is a non-starter. I don't think any serious Israeli, I'm not talking about the current government, people even like myself, will not tolerate the idea that Hamas will become once again an official part of the government in Gaza. Although, by the way, thanks to our stupidity, Hamas is trying to rebuild its influence in Gaza once again, because we have made mistakes. We didn't think about alternatives. Now, of course, Iran can say, well, we can tolerate it because it will enable Hamas to take over the West Bank. The irony of the tragedy of the Palestinians, I would say, that whereas the people in Gaza, many of them, I don't know if all of them, finally understood that Hamas is harmful to them, the people in the West Bank, apparently large majority, still supports Hamas more than ever, because for them, the price that Hamas inflicted on Israel is worth the suffering of the Palestinians. One of the tragedies of the Palestinians, I have to say it, I may sound, blunt or politically incorrect, is that too often the Palestinians urge to take revenge against us or punish us, receive high priority than of saving them or building their own society and state. I think this has been one of the major Palestinian tragedies from the 1930s to this day. And there is a problem here with Palestinian public opinion in the West Bank, and by the way, also many Fatah people in the West Bank who believe that there's a need to work with Hamas. This is not going to happen. Work. It's not something Israel will accept. Not even another Israeli government. Not after October 7th.
Good, thank you.
Let me ask a question that comes from Arnold Englander, a viewer. Is there any political group in Iran that voices opposition to the Iranian government? And if so,
No.
So, no.
You can't voice opposition to the government in Iran and remain free. It's not going to happen. No. Again, I think there's a great disillusionment among the people, alienation from the regime, disenchantment for the regime, hatred of the regime, but no public organized opposition. That's impossible.
So we no longer see the kinds of organizations that existed decades ago that would challenge. I mean, during the Shah's regime,
no.
There were organizations in the early days of Khomeini. No, nothing.
Nothing.
So it really is a highly secure police state.
Yes. Again, anything can happen, and there may be something that major upheaval 2 weeks from now in Iran when millions will come to the streets for some reason, but we don't have any organized opposition. That's impossible.
So perhaps one last question, unless John or Mark have something to add, which takes us to a different realm. We've talked about Russia and Syria. We recognize that Turkey has a role to play. But over the last few years, China has become an increasingly sophisticated participant in events all over the world, not least the Middle East. Their relations, their efforts, diplomatic and economic, to engage the Saudis, the Iranians, the Israelis for decades. And yet we don't, at least I don't know of efforts that the Chinese have made or that they have been invited to participate in that might bring people to the table in new and thoughtful ways. Is China a factor only in terms of bilateral economic opportunities, or do you have a sense that it could play the kind of role that Americans and Russians in various times in their history have tried to play, but it's never really been fulfilled?
Well, it's a long story. I would say several things. One is for many years, until very recently, including recently, it was very convenient for China that it made business, and the Americans were the policemen that kept order, and again, the expenses were on the American side. Now, China did play a role in sort of as a mediator or sponsor of the Saudi Iranian rapprochement in 2023, March 2023.
Yeah.
Now, Saudis are, of course, a major economic player, but also they were very careful to maintain a balance between the Saudis and the Arab states. They annoyed the Iranians when they expressed support for the Emirati position on the 3 tiny islands in the entry of the Persian Gulf. Now, regarding Chinese-Israeli relations, I would say 3 things. One is there's been a significant decline in Israeli-Chinese cooperation, investments, relations in recent years. Partly because of the Chinese no longer need Israeli technology, partly because of American pressures on Israel not to sell certain technology to the Chinese. Also, Israeli field. Now, even worse. From October 7th until maybe a month ago, China took an extremely hostile position against Israel. China refused to condemn October 7th attack. It voted against Israel. It took a very hostile position. Israel, by the way, something very worrisome, the spread of anti-Semitic talk in China, in the internet. Horrible. Something we never imagined existed in China. But surprisingly enough, a month ago, there seems to be a slight change in Chinese position toward Israel. For the first time, China expressed some sympathy to the plight of Israelis since October 7th. For the first time, it's tiny change, and they appointed a new ambassador in Israel who again made a statement which he hopes for improvement of Chinese-Israel relations. So maybe I'm cautious here, there's a certain change that China has reversed a little bit its anti-Israeli shift, because, by the way, we've been successful militarily, because Iran proved to be weaker than they expected. It's not that they're not going to disengage from Iran. Iran is an important oil supplier for them, but maybe China will be. Now, one major reason why China is very hostile to us, because China, associates us as an American protege or satellite, and because Xi Jinping is becoming increasingly hostile to America, we are paying the price. But I wouldn't put much hopes in China as a peacemaker in the Middle East. I don't think it's going to happen soon.
Okay, thank you. Mark, I saw on the Q&A that you were going to answer a question online.
Oh, that just somebody was asking about how to access the recording. So for those of you who are interested, the recordings are all available on the Holy Blossom website and the Holy Blossom YouTube TV channel. So if you have any problems, just let us know and we'll get you the links.
Okay, thank you.
Not so easy to find them on the Holy Blossom website, I'll tell you.
No, it's not helpful.
Not easy at all. So I would, and even going to even going to YouTube is not the easiest thing in the world. It would be useful if there was one link that you could hit that would take you straight to all of it. So I'm just making a plea for simplicity for us old guys and gals.
Rabbi K is making note of that.
Made notes, and in previous sessions of the Israel Dialogues, we had a playlist, and we will make one again to send out to people. So thank you,
Rabbi.
Thank you.
So Meir, thank you so much. This has really been enormously interesting, and you've opened up a lot of areas that I'm sure most of us simply were either unaware or ill-informed, and you've left us with a lot of issues to consider. Unfortunately, much of the message is not an optimistic one.
Right.
But I guess that's the reality of the day and the reality of the region. I'm still occasionally in touch, though very carefully, with a former postdoc of mine who's a female scholar from Tehran who came and spent a year and a half doing research here in Toronto quite some time ago. And I know it's not been an easy time for her. And you talk about the brain drain, and she has been desperate to leave. But the opportunities, and often the way that we in the West receive those who want to come from Iran, with some skepticism, make it difficult. But she's an indicator of what you were saying about the gap, and that she sees little future in Iran. How that affects the options that the Israelis have in terms of their own security is not clear. And while I will admit that I've never been enthusiastic about the Israeli government's priority of Iran over other issues, in particular the Palestinians, I can understand how this has emerged and has taken on a life of its own, especially with questions of missiles and the nuclear, and seeing little opportunity of regime change, or liberalization, mobilization of change. So with all that, thank you. I am sure that we're going to draw on you again, because this is not going to go away anytime soon, though there will be changes, I'm sure, that we need to understand. So Mayor, thank you so much. And we
You're
wish
most welcome.
you a good rest of your sabbatical at
Thank you very much.
Georgetown in Washington.
Thank you very much.
And maybe we
If you
wish
have
everybody.
insights, if you have insights in the new imperial capital as Trump comes to power, let us know.
Shabbat
Bye-bye.
shalom to everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
You.
Thank you.